Scott Morrison claims that he isn't and was never racist, but it isn't that difficult to find his own quotes and actions that suggest otherwise. Recent reports revealed that 15 years ago, Scott Morrison allegedly weaponized Michael Tauch's Lebanese heritage. In trying to beat Tauch in winning the electorate of Cook, Morrison argued that after the Cronulla riots, there was no way that we could have a Lebanese person in politics. And this is how Morrison officially began his career in politics. Then, in 2011, an article from the Sydney Morning Herald exposed Morrison's plan to develop an anti-Muslim strategy against Muslim immigration. This was the same week he also commented on the cost of asylum seekers' funerals. Even some of his Liberal colleagues pushed back against the strategy. In 2013, Morrison was handed the immigration portfolio by then PM Tony Abbott. It went just about as anyone would expect. Morrison called asylum seekers illegal arrivals and continued the reign of indefinitely locking up high-risk children, a brutally illegal act widely condemned by the international community. But then in 2018, Morrison became PM. Roughly a month later, he made this country one of only a handful of countries in the entire world to say that it will recognize West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, showing his support for what UN human rights experts have deemed as apartheid in an illegally occupied Palestine. Then, as the whole world rallied around George Floyd's murder and those sleeping here finally woke up to the injustice First Nations people have faced for decades at the hands of police brutality, Black Lives Matter protesters chanted that 432 Aboriginal people had died in custody since the Royal Commission began, but only some days later, that number was out of date. Morrison did and continues to do nothing about it. Within the same couple of weeks, Morrison then said there was no slavery in Australia, magically forgetting about blackbirding when 62,000 people were lured or kidnapped from the Pacific Islands and brought to Queensland as enslaved people. In the lead up to Invasion Day in 2021, Morrison mourned, saying in an interview that when those 12 ships turned up in Sydney all those years ago, it wasn't a particularly flash day for the people on those vessels either. A year later, Morrison flat out denied that refugees were being kept in Park Hotel by questioning their status as asylum seekers.
It's not clear that, to my information, that someone in that case is actually a refugee.
So they were just human beings locked up for funsies? But his moment of 2022 probably takes the cake. In apologising to the stolen generations, Morrison said that sorry isn't the hardest word to say. The hardest is, I forgive you. Kind of like how a gaslighter will convince you that everything is your fault and you owed them something. The First People's Assembly of Victoria offered a short and succinct response: get in the bin. So let's throw out the trash this election and vote Scott Morrison out. These examples are merely a few of a litany to choose from. This is a person who has never once fought for First Nations or people of colour, and it's time to make sure that he pays for it by voting him out this election.
Authorised by L. Baldwin, GetUp, Brisbane.